sets out, so how do we tell a good king from a bad king? And how do we know what a good ruler is? And in general, like where are we going? The kings in Israel basically had two tasks. And the first one was foreign relations, and the second one was defending the cause of the poor and the needy. In terms of the first task, the kings of Israel tended to do this task either really badly or not at all. And I'm not sure if the psalm is part of the problem or part of the solution. Because the psalm basically says that dealing with the nations around is done in basically one way, and that is you crush them. That's how you deal with them, is you go out there with your army and you defeat and you destroy, and there, right, so they will come to you and lick your boots off when you're done. Right? Which tends to not be a great way to deal with the people around you. Because it assumes that they are basically your enemies, not potential friends. Right? Not people who you have a common interest with. The one king in Israel's history that actually tried to get along with the neighbors was Solomon. He is roundly condemned by the text for trying to do this, because that wasn't what Israel's kings were supposed to be doing. So it's this weird way in which, right, if we did our foreign relations like this text wants us to, we would basically get rid of the State Department and raise our military budget. Right? The writer of this text would have understood "Make America Great Again." That it's basically about us and our priorities. But what's interesting also to me is that the two priorities don't fit well in my head. Right? That this idea of going out and defeating your enemies and dealing with everything in this sort of power-conscious, hierarchical way doesn't really lead to rulers who care about the poor. These seem to be opposite things to me. And so I think, when God sent Jesus, that Jesus made a choice. I could rule the first way, the sort of hierarchical, top-down power, I will crush my enemies kind of way, or I don't actually care about the poor and the needy. I think there's a choice to be made here, and I think Jesus deliberately made a choice as to which part of this psalm he was going to care about. So this is where we begin, by setting out the priorities for who we are as followers of Jesus. It's always important in reading stories like this to make sense of them geographically, because they contain phrases like, "A multitude of camels shall cover you." Is this like one of your top 10 ideals? I grew up in Saskatchewan, which is a province in Canada. And Saskatchewan identity is formed by trains. That in Saskatchewan, we loaded trains full of wheat and barley and canola and coal and oil and potash and uranium and gold, and it all went out. It all went out east or west or north or somewhere, and they came back empty, and then we loaded them all full again. And we got paid a wee little bit for this, just enough to survive till the next year so we could do it all again. Typical extraction economy. For many years we lived in Kansas, and Kansas was very similar to that we loaded up. Right? Kansas wasn't so much train out country, although it happened as flyover country. Right? There's the East Coast and the West Coast, and there's this big expanse of nothing in the middle, right? So you fly over to get to one exciting place or the other. But again, an extraction economy where the wheat went out, and it really wasn't important in any way until you actually wanted to eat. And then Kansas was sort of handy to have, but no one really thought of it. Now I live in West Virginia. And here we are, back in extraction country again. The difference in West Virginia, I think, is that the thing that's being extracted is non-renewable. Right? In Saskatchewan and in Kansas, you can only grow more wheat. Next year, you're going to grow more wheat, and you can keep doing that probably forever. Right? And there's always going to be more. Or, you know, in Saskatchewan, we did a lot of lumber, right? And you know the trees are going to grow. But in West Virginia, when the coal runs out, the coal is going to run out. When the oil runs out, the oil is going to run out. And do we really want to go back to clear cutting our forests? Hopefully not. Right? So we have a very, but again, extraction economy. Israel wasn't an extraction economy, and the reason it wasn't an extraction economy is because there was nothing to extract. There is no oil, and there is no gold, and there is no mining, and the land produces just barely enough food to feed the people that were there, and today it doesn't even come close to producing enough food for the people that are there. So there was nothing to extract in Israel for most of its history. Israel was caravan through country. That is, that the wealth of Africa, of Egypt and Ethiopia, and this mystical place called Sheba, which may in fact have been West Africa, right, came up in these great long trains of camels through Israel on their way to Syria and Assyria and Babylon and Persia. And then the wealth of those great nations up there came back on the camels through Israel, but didn't stop, right? And down south to Egypt. So Israel, the people of Israel, watched all of this wealth flow through, but not stop. Right? And so this meant that the people in Israel, who really, really wanted to get ahead, left on one of those camel trains. And it meant that every time there's an international dispute going on, Israel got stuck in the middle. And so the vast majority of wars that went on all through Israel's history, and there were a lot of them, happened not because of Israel, but because they were in the way between the Egyptians and whoever it was up north that was trying to make, right? So one group was trying to expand, or the other group was trying to expand, and the kings of Israel were mostly caught in this sort of reality. And Israel didn't even get taxes for the stuff that was going through because they didn't even control their own borders. So Israel was like West Virginia, except they didn't even get extraction money. They just watched the money flow through. And so Isaiah is looking forward to a time when someday the wealth that they see continually going through was actually going to stop. It's going to stop in Israel. May you be covered by 1,000 camels. May the wealth of all those camels stop here for a change. And it's a sentiment that I think we in West Virginia can feel very easily. Right? When is it going to be our turn? When is the wealth that we see all around us, right, on the TV and on the news and all of this, right, when is it going to be West Virginia's turn? And the prophets are people who would understand very well, make America great again. They are people who said, yeah, when's it going to be our turn? And in so many ways, that's Isaiah's message. You are going to be so tired of winning, says Isaiah. Extraction is both economic and spiritual. When everything flows out, it affects how you see yourself. It affects how you see your community. It affects how you see your state. Right? West Virginia is a place where you leave. And so Isaiah imagines a time when things come back. In West Virginia, the miners learned very quickly that their lives are worth less than their coal. And so Isaiah imagines a time when in West Virginia, the resources come this way. A time when everyone shares and we get some of ours back. ancient world, people told stories like this. They told stories about the wondrous miracles that accompanied the birth of heroes. The birth of the greatest and mightiest of the great and mighty. This is that kind of story. I don't think typical, but it fits in with the general picture of how people in the ancient world talked about the great people. So really what is unusual about this story is not that this story is told or that it happened. What's unusual about this story is that it's told about a nobody rabbi from some unknown little place who ended up dead on a cross. And that's really the peculiar part of this story. Why is it that people all over the world, millions and millions of people, know this story about an event that happened to a nobody rabbi from nowhere, Israel? And the answer to that question is because of the birth of the movement. John the Baptist also had a miraculous birth story. But the only reason we know John the Baptist's story is not because the John the Baptist movement continued, but because the Jesus movement also remembered the John the Baptist story, that they incorporated him. And we do know that John the Baptist started his own movement, that there were John the Baptist disciples in various parts of the ancient Mediterranean. Right? But that movement died out, and the Jesus movement, right, for whatever reason, continued. So that's what I want to highlight this morning. And we are here as part of an ongoing movement. We are not a fan club. We are not the Jesus fan club. Fan clubs exist to go, yay, whoever. Right? And we're not here to do, yay, Jesus. We are here to accomplish something else. Fan clubs don't usually accomplish anything. We might not argue that. We are also not a history society. History societies exist to tell the old stories and hopefully draw some sort of lessons from them. And we do that to some extent. Right? We tell the old stories and we try to draw lessons. Right? But we also try to accomplish something. Right? More so than I think most history societies would claim to. Again, you might want to argue that. Right? So as we think about who we are, we need to remember what we're not. And one of the challenges of the church is that it tries after a while, or it morphs into an institution. And the purpose of an institution in good times is self-promotion, and the purpose of an institution in bad times is survival. But we're not an institution. We're a movement. And so, right, promotion and survival are not our goals. The movement has its own goals. So we need to, again, go back to original priorities. Right? That we look back at the Psalms and we go, okay, there was this whole international relations thing and this care for the poor thing. And us and, international relations, not really our thing. Right? Jesus said, no, let's do the care for the poor thing. Let's do that one. Let's highlight that one instead. So this is part of our movement. And the wealth of 1,000 camels covering us, right? But survival, but sharing with one another, right? Of not seeing the wealth leave and pretending that's not our issue, right? It's not true. This is part of the movement. And the movement is so interesting, the Jesus movement, because it doesn't have, like, one goal. It isn't like, well, if we achieve this, then we'd be done. Right? But it's this ongoing amorphous kind of thing where we get sort of one step forward and then try to figure out, so what is the next step? Right? And so is the next step to, make sure that all of the people who get elected are on our side? Well, yeah, except that we elect them and they, sort of tend to go their own way. And, right, we have to keep, it's this very interesting movement. But that's always the goal. Right? There's always something else out there that we call the kingdom of God. that continues to guide us as a church. So we get stories like this, and they are part of that story. So part of this story is that kings come to us. We don't go begging to kings. This is not the story of Mary and Joseph showing up at Herod's door looking for handouts. This is the story of the wise men coming to Jesus. And trying to figure out exactly what that means in the context of West Virginia. Right? Morgantown Church of the Brethren isn't, I don't think, in any way straightforward or obvious. But it clearly, right, sets us on this path. And so we gather and we try to figure it out, and then we go out. Because that's ultimately what the church is. But part of what we do when we gather is we tell the story, and then we, in some small ways, enact the story. So that's what we want to do now. Because we want to, right, use the bread and the wine and the grape juice this morning to enact some of these ideas. To enact the idea that part of what we do is we share. We share basic food with each other. Right? We create this community where we are all part of this movement. Right? And we take that and go on. So I invite you to come forward.